Greetings fellow Whovians and welcome to Timey Wimey Review. I continue the Sarah Jane tribute month of April by looking in perhaps one of the unique parts of Doctor Who's history, K9 and Company, A Girl's Best Friend, which was the pilot that was originally broadcast on BBC One in December of 1981. So this episode of K9 and Company was treated as a one-off special or a pilot as part of the Christmas festivities of the BBC back in 1981, but could potentially grow into a full series in its own right. Because not only you have the return of K9, but you also have the return of Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane Smith. So what happens when the Doctor's best friend meets the Doctor's robotic best friend? Hit the subscribe button as we find out in this review. Quick disclaimer, this was the first time that I've actually sat down and watched the episode of A Girl's Best Friend in its entirety, and I really wanted to quickly talk about firstly the beginning theme tune and the opening sort of package to the show, if you can call it that. I mean, it is so 1980s, it's amazing, with just the tune of K9 and the little sort of funky sort of beat going off there, and I do love the shot of Elizabeth Sladen on the rock where he's sort of like just starring Elizabeth Sladen, and the face that she makes there, bless her, looks like she hasn't got a clue what's going on. And I imagine like the director who did the shots for the opening intro probably didn't have a clue, because what we saw in that intro isn't quite what we saw in the show, because the intro was kind of just Elizabeth Sladen drinking wine, having a little jog, driving around in an old metro, and K9 just on the wall, can probably shoot some stuff, shouting K9. So very bizarre, but very, very 80s. So after that crazy 80s montage intro to the show, we get even more craziness when we've got witchcraft and some kind of sacrificial ritual going on there. I mean, this is just bonkers from the start. Just in case you don't know the plot, it's pretty much Sarah Jane Smith with the help of K9 and Sarah Jane's aunt's ward called Brendan to investigate these ongoing reports of, increasing reports, sorry, of witchcraft happening in a fictional village in England. I'm trying hard not to view it through sort of modern eyes, especially for what we saw in the Sarah Jane adventures and when Elizabeth Sladen came back in modern era of Doctor Who. I'm just judging this solely by what I saw on screen as if I was watching this for the first time back in the 80s. And Elizabeth Sladen does a really good job. She comes back as Sarah Jane Smith, and that must have been thrilling to do at the, in the first instance, but quite hard to do as well, because she has gone away from our screens for a good, I would say, what, 4 or 5 years at this point. So to come back to a character, and especially with a character that in this story has, is the focal point to a certain extent, but I feel like there was like a bit of a glass ceiling with how far Elizabeth Sladen could have gone with her performance in this. So, for example, the scene where they do finally activate K9, he's in this box. It was a present given to her from the Doctor, and her reaction, if she was doing that now, I can imagine if she did that now, and it was the first time that she heard the word the Doctor for so much, for so long time, I think she would have quite welled up. Or, when Elizabeth does that amazing job of like that shocked brave and the quivering lip, and you can just see in the eyes all the emotions just rolled into one. I can imagine it being a bit more like that, where it was sort of like, what, the Doctor, and very thankful for the Doctor to give this special gift, which is K9. I also like the character of Brendan in this episode. He, for me, kind of took over what Sarah Jane was doing when she was the companion with the Doctor, and her sort of character as the sort of explaining to the audience what's going on in Doctor Who. I thought that Brendan did that. Speaking of Luke, yeah, he is pretty much like a Luke from the Sarah Jane Adventures, minus the genius that is Luke, the minus all the brains. And speaking of the star of the show, let's talk about K9. I thought he was used quite well in this pilot episode. Great to hear John Leeson back as the voice of K9. And yeah, they used K9 quite sparingly in this episode and didn't outstay his welcome. I can imagine for fellow Whovians, he's quite a polarising figure. Some people love him, other people hate him. I like him. I like K9. He's a good dog at the end of the day. And yeah, he didn't outstay his welcome, but he also gets to save the day in this episode. I just checked the box. It's actually 50 minutes running time this episode. I thought it was 60 minutes, so apologise. It did feel like 60 minutes. The pacing was a little bit off in areas. It felt a little bit padded in some parts of the scenes. I think, there was just trying to stretch it. And it is difficult, if you're sort of used to 25-minute formats for Doctor Who, and then trying to sort of stretch it out for a sort of 50-60 minute show. Yeah, it is a bit difficult to do. I think maybe could have trimmed a few, or maybe just tightened up some scenes, I think would have been better and would have been a bit more of a pacier sort of outlook to this episode. And also the story is a little bit jarring. It takes a while to get your head around what's going on. I think because you're just suspicious. I don't know if it was me again looking in modern viewing eyes, but all the characters was just acting so suspicious because it was all happening in this village with the whole sort of witchcraft culture that's going off. You just didn't trust anyone. I felt, if anything, I'm sure maybe Simon Pegg and Nick Frost watched this episode way back in the 80s and kind of wrote it into Hot Fuzz. That's what it kind of reminded me of a bit. Just Hot Fuzz. They just borrowed it from A Girl's Best Friend, K9 and Company. So yeah, it was very odd that you could only trust really Sarah Jane, K9, Brendan, maybe to a certain extent Sarah's aunt. But there was Sarah's friend, and I can't remember her name, I do apologise, who kept like asking her, oh, come round for a drink. I just didn't trust her at all. And she was probably being just friendly, knowing that Sarah Jane is new to this village. But yeah, you just couldn't trust anyone, and it was just a little bit jarring, to say the least. On the whole, I was entertained, so I'm going to give K9 and Company, A Girl's Best Friend, a TARDIS rating of 6 out of 10. It was entertaining. Yes, it could have been a little bit more neater in places in terms of padding and story writing. And yeah, characters, it was a bit sort of jarring because, knowing that it doesn't really go anywhere at the end. This is, what you see is what you get. But the fact that they managed to get something and pull something out of the hat is really good. The fact that the BBC head of drama at the time gave it a green light to do this Christmas special with the view of potentially a full series. And not only, if we didn't have K9 and Company, we wouldn't have had Hot Fuzz, to be honest, but we definitely wouldn't have had the Sarah Jane Adventures. It would have, that maybe those seeds would have been planted for Russell T Davies to bring back Elizabeth Sladen for the second season of Doctor Who and give an amazing spin-off of the Sarah Jane Adventures. It's certainly not a Sarah Jane Adventure type story. This was kind of like a classic Doctor Who version of Sarah Jane Adventures, but given the K9 title because K9 was arguably quite popular at the time in the late 70s and 80s. So again, you know, to make something, especially with the shooting that they had. I don't think they had much time to shoot something, especially with it being all done in the dark. I think in the DVD documentary on this, it was done in a cold November, so they didn't have that much daylight, so most of it was done in the dark. Again, they managed to pull something out of the hat and give us something quite entertaining. So if you haven't watched this before, do check it out. You can find it quite easily on DVD. I'm sure you can buy that online somewhere. But if you are subscribed to BritBox, it is now on BritBox streaming service. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts on K9 and Company. Have you managed to watch this before? Will you be watching it now after watching this review? And also, if you have watched it and you think, yes, it could have gone for a full series, what type of adventures would you have liked to have seen this show take off? Do you think it would have stayed in that fictional village, or do you think they would have moved somewhere else in England? Yeah, let's have a good old chinwag and show some love for K9 and Company. Also, please check out the link in the descriptions for my fundraising page for Cancer Research UK. I've set up this fundraising page to raise some money for Cancer Research UK in honour of Elizabeth Sladen, who sadly passed away 10 years ago due to cancer. So let's try and raise some money for this worthy cause. This fundraising page is open until the end of May 2021. Next time on Timey Wimey Review, I will be continuing the Sarah Jane Tribute Month by reviewing the modern era of Doctor Who episode, School Reunion. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like the video, share the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you can, please donate to Cancer Research UK by clicking on the description link for that fundraising page. Until then, as Sarah Jane once said, thank you, K9.